Hello and welcome to the lecture on empty arrays. Go to arrays folder, example 3 empty arrays. Open up the logical flow. We'll understand how to define and work with empty arrays. Okay, part of this will create empty arrays.php file. So let's create this file and understand how to create an empty array. So store in the arrays folder. So how to define an empty array? So remember this, only the square brackets means it's an empty array. Okay, it's like initializing an array with no values, which is an empty value. So how to define an empty arrays? You can say $array is equal to square brackets, nothing inside it. Okay, typically you will put some values, but if you don't put some values, this is called as empty array. The array is initialized and it is empty, right? So if you print the length of the array, okay, php, let's run this file. Okay, it's 0. It is initialized with nothing. Okay, it's called as an empty array. Let's do a var dump as well to understand what's inside this array. And also do a printer. Okay, the var dump is 0 elements, right, and nothing inside. The array also is empty. Okay, so this have to understand this, how to define an empty array so that you can add values later in your program. Okay, the way to define empty arrays is just open and close the square brackets. How to check if an array is empty or not? So if you do if empty, so we can say array is empty. There's a method called empty using which you can check whether the array is empty or not. Okay, you can say array is empty. Now can you guess the output of this? Let's do a var dump. Okay, guess the output. What will be the output of an array? Okay, it's saying it is of integer of 10. If you have observed correctly, you have changed the data type. We have changed from an array to an integer. Okay, this is not a way to store a value into an array. Okay, if you once you do just the normal integer operation on the array name, it converts into an integer. So if you want to see this, it was an array, it is converted into an integer. So I can show you that. Okay, previously it was an array, then it becomes an integer. So this is not the right way to store in an array. Okay, remember that. So this basically converted array to integers. Well, how to store this number into an array? Okay, if you want to store that value, you should be passing in the square brackets. You should be doing like this, right? And if you do a var dump, you can guess the output here. You will find that the array is properly stored at index 0, data type of integer, value 10, and the length is 1. Okay, let's take another example. What do you think is an output of this? Okay, here we have said please assign the value 10 to an array. What happens if you are storing the 0th value as an array? Okay, it's interesting to understand that index 0 holds an array. Okay, here we are assigning to that index 0, but here in the 0 itself we are assigning an array, okay, which has 10 as the first value. So you're assigning an array to the 0th value. So let's do a var dump and understand the difference between the two. This is very important to understand when you work with an array. You should know when you just pass a value what happens to the array. If you don't mention the index number and just pass the array, what happens? If you mention the index number and pass the array, you should know what the output will look like. Okay, so let's look at that example. So if you look at that example, previously we say the value 10 is stored at 0th position, right? But here at the 0th position an array is been stored. Okay, an array itself has a 0th position which has one array element of type integer and the value is 10. Okay, so you should be very clear to understand between these two differences. Okay, first difference, you are storing at the 0th value. The second, at 0th value you are storing an array. Okay, so that's why the 0th value is an array here and the 0th value here is the value 10. Okay, there's a lot of difference between the two. If you want to reset the array, you can just simply say like this. This way the array will be reset. Let's do a var dump of an array. Okay, and you can find the array is reset. You can even check the if condition here. Okay, the array is empty. So this is the way to even reset the arrays. Okay, I'll give you a final example to think through what will happen when you type an array inside an array. Okay, if you don't understand this, but high likely you are not really understanding how arrays are working. But if you have understand what is this, what happens within a square brackets, inside a square brackets, then you're actually trying to understand how the array works. Okay, so let's do a var dump and then we'll understand how array works. Okay, so the first array, that is this array, right, is having one element, that is the 0th element, but the array inside that actually doesn't have an element. That's why it is 0 element. Wherever you mention square brackets, immediately it will become an array. If you mention another square brackets inside a square brackets, this becomes an array at 0th element of the parent element. Okay, that's what it's showing here. If the array element of parent have one element and in 0th position it has an array, but that array at 0th element is empty. Okay, it's very important to understand this and you should know how it works. Okay, if you are understanding how this is working, then most likely you are understanding the concept of arrays. Okay, and I always want you to remember this. The square brackets means empty arrays. Okay, well, that's all about empty arrays and I'll see you in the next one.